which I've now done. So welcome everyone to our weekly call. I will just quickly share my slides just for a moment. Do a brief intro. Right, so this week, as many of you will be aware, we're going to do, Robert Šefr from Whalebone has kindly joined us and will give us an update on the DNS for EU project. I think he joined us about 13 months ago, so I look forward to hearing how things have moved on in the interim. I'm sure that it's flown by for the project team and the wider consortium. And then, as always, I'll go through some recent developments, forthcoming events, etc. Amongst other things, I'm going to touch on some changes within the ITF community on the back of the last NomCom, and also just mention briefly the forthcoming Internet Governance Forum meeting at the end of this year. But more of that in due course. So let me stop sharing. Welcome, Robert. Thank you for joining and for agreeing to sort of share this update with us. If you wish to, you should be able to sort of share your screen and any slides if that makes sense, but you don't need to, otherwise just talk. And I think the plan is you've got about 20 minutes worth of content, should allow roughly 10 minutes for Q&A before you have to disappear at around 1:30. So the floor is yours.
Exactly. Thank you for the invitation, Andrew, and it's a pleasure to be able to present here the update for everyone. Let me share my screen. I will use some slides to guide, especially me, not to forget anything important. So you should be able to see the slides by now.
Yeah, they're on the screen. That's worked well.
That's good. That's good. One of the immediate impression is that one of the results of the consortium is that we have a branding for DNS for EU. We have a website, and we have social media profiles communicating some of the updates also continuously. I will very briefly, I'll spend here just a few seconds, run you through the overview, especially for those of you who are not really familiar historically, or probably most people forgot, and then we'll look into technology aspects, the news from legal ethics and policy and threat intelligence. Yeah, that's my plan, to provide what has happened during the year 2023. So from the project standpoint, in a very fast manner to recap, the goal of ENISA and the European Commission is to strengthen the digital security and independence of the European Union. So both aspects are quite heavy in the project, and the challenge that we aim to solve is that the governmental institutions and citizens are not well protected, and the reaction on threats is very slow, and we see a huge opportunity in DNS to be used to improve the situation, since the DNS and the protective DNS can be adopted really quickly. Yeah, so this is it, and very briefly on the consortium that's behind it. The consortium is led by Whalebone, which I'm a CTO of, and then multiple important members. From technology standpoint, I would mention CZNIC, which is behind Not Resolver, which is one of the base stones from the resolution perspective of the DNS for EU. Then there are multiple consortium members focused on threat intelligence and the security part, and legal part, which is the Timelex from Belgium, the third part. They are heavily involved in how we deal with the legal and ethical aspects of the project. Then what I would like to to stress out. It's really important because we get a lot of misalignments. From our perspective, DNS for EU is a project. But it's not a particular service or not a particular technology. To be able to understand what's hidden under the project, these are the three main areas and use cases. The first one is the public service, the public resolvers, which usually is understood under the brand of DNS for EU. If you ask someone somehow familiar with the DNS for EU, they usually imagine that this is the public part. From our perspective, that's maybe not the most important part. It's important. It's one of the building blocks, I would say. So the public part will be running public IP addresses with the DNS service with different flavors of protective DNS. Will apply strict anonymization measures, and what is interesting, could also be hosted by a telco, because we understand telcos as a very important partners to us. So telco can decide to run on their own on the same IP address also the instance of public DNS resolver. Yet they have to follow all the principles, strict anonymization, data processing, and configurations that are followed by the public solver. Then the second use case is where the telco decides, I would like to have the technology, yet I have some other requirements. I would like to approach the data processing in a different way. I would like to configure the services in a different way. I would like to leverage the threat intelligence and the protective DNS somehow different. That's okay, can be done. Yet they cannot host this on the same IP as the public resolvers. To be clear, towards the end users, that this is not the same service as the public resolver, that the telco is simply using the technology, and they are using it in a way that they would be using other resolver and applying some other rules, which they have to communicate to the end users as well, based on the GDPR requirements, etc. But they simply use their own IP address. And the last use case is the government use case, where the government may decide to leverage the threat intelligence that we have and the DNS resolution technology that we have to protect the institutions, the public institutions. So the government may offer this to the public institutions and tell them, hey, there's this instance of DNS for EU for our country, which you may use, and we encourage you to use it. And what it brings to the government is that the government has the opportunity to, in a very fast manner, to disseminate threat intelligence and to protect all the institutions using this protective DNS in a few seconds, basically. If there is a new threat identified that can be mitigated at the DNS level. Plus, it's also a very convenient point, single point for threat hunting and incident response should anything happen, or should the analysts would like to look into the traffic of multiple, even thousands of different public institutions to look if they are being targeted by some kinds of phishing or malicious campaigns. What it's not intended for is the usage and the governmental use case. It's not the usage for citizens. For this usual citizens, they will use the public resolvers where the anonymity and the independence is ensured. The governmental instance is understood in a way as a security tool, security service for the public institutions, such as a proxy or firewall or other security product would be used. So it's a very different use case. I hope it's so far somehow clear. And please interrupt me in case you would like to discuss anything like immediately. Don't wait for Q&A. Since there is no interruption, I will continue.
Sorry.
Yes.
I didn't find the mute button quick enough. My bad. So you said telcos can also run your DNS service, right? And that also includes the regulatory intelligence, not only the threat intelligence. From some countries, I know that, for example, from Italy, the telcos are obliged to run adult content filtering. This is not strictly spoken in threat filtering, but more a content filtering the telcos are supposed to do. Would that also be possible if a telco uses your DNS?
Yes, it's a part of the project. So the support for the regulatory compliance, yeah, for the individual countries is or will be included. For example, Italy, we already have the coverage, yeah, for the regulatory compliance. So we already know what has to be done in Italy. We already have the data. We support that. We don't have at the moment. We don't have all the EU member states supported, but we are step by step extending the coverage.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Yep, you're welcome. Thank you for the question. And I will progress to some major highlights from the technology perspective. What happened? One of the things is that there are some changes on not resolver level already being published, and some are scheduled and being developed, and we expect them in a foreseeable future, let's say. So the two major areas I would like to describe here is that the first is that the not resolver version 6 is being tested, yeah, by us and multiple other not resolver users. I will describe what it means and what it involves. And the anti-DDoS measures are being developed by the not resolver team, as we identified those as the most important ones, or from the scope of missing features. So from the standpoint of not resolver 6, it's extremely interesting for us because it matches especially some of the advanced requests from telcos that we had and that we have seen, which I would say is basically like zero downtime reconfiguration, which we as Whalebone already are doing. Yet it's not a native way of not resolver. We are doing it in another manner. It's an option to approach the configuration via API, via CLI tools, so it can be very easily automated. So that's also very important. Since we see that different telco teams are using different tools, some are running the configuration distribution on Ansible, some are running some scripts and would like to reconfigure everything by API, etc., etc. So this is what we will involve, and this is what we will support. As soon as the stable not resolver is 6.x is released, which will be in upcoming months. So we find this very interesting, very nice, and modern from how advanced enterprise use cases will be supported. Speaking of anti-DDoS measures, the team is working mostly on two areas, basically. And we have split them into these like logical categories. The first one is not harming others, which means we want to do our best in a way that the resolvers cannot be misused to harm someone else, especially the UDP reflection. That's one part, yeah, not to be misused for some reflective DDoS attacks, and also to protect the authoritative servers. So to apply some logical limits, yeah, not to I don't know, for example, to avoid some extensive slow drip attacks on the DNS. So that's one part. The second is definitely we want to maintain the service for the users and protect the resolvers themselves. And the direction we are discussing is more like in the prioritization on what will be and how will be handled, and how we make sure that the most important services are available to the end users, rather than to introduce some hard limits and rate limits, etc. They may be needed, but first we want to focus on doing the priority things first, and then using things effectively to avoid a situation where a small group of users would consume most of the CPU or most of the memory for their needs. Yeah, and yes, so that's the direction how we are thinking. And we know there are options, even open source options, how to deal with these things at the moment. But we decided it will be very healthy if there is an alternative, and if it will be also natively included in Node Resolver. At the end, we may decide to combine things or have two different sets of resolvers with two different technologies, etc. But overall, for the ecosystem, I still believe it will be extremely healthy if there will be a possibility of choice. I'll now switch from the DNS resolution technology to the backend, just to sum up what the backend in our terms means and what does it deliver. Backend, what we understand under backend, is a control and data plane for all the DNS resolvers, no matter if we are running 15 or 100 of 1,000 or 1,000 of them, because it can be actually quite a large number. Except the public resolvers, there will be the telco run operated resolvers and the government operated resolvers. So the numbers can be quite high, and we have to make sure that they are all properly configured and that we gather all the data and evaluate all the data from the resolvers, that we deliver the monitoring, reporting, alerting, that everything is in sync, which is a tricky thing, speaking of configuration, speaking of the threat intelligence and the content intelligence, the regulatory block list, for example, to make sure that everything is in sync and that everyone can be sure that it's in sync. And of course, on the backend, since there is a huge chance that the people from telco will have access to their tenant, people from government will have access to their tenant, or even tenants, speaking of multiple public institutions, etc. We have to be very clear and very confident about authentication, authorization, and accounting of all the actions that are happening. So this is what we were doing, and we still, especially, for example, we have finished the security analysis in Q4 last year. So we now know some gaps in the authentication, authorization, accounting space, and we will be filling the gaps this year to be like fully confident with the security coverage that we expect from the backend. And by the way, the backend is already up and running, and it's running within a European data center, or within a cloud provider, European cloud provider, which is one of the expectations from the DNS for EU. So we were quite happy to choose one at the end after several evaluations. And besides the security area, we will be focusing on the Node Resolver 6 support on the backend. And we have also scheduled some performance improvements. As we see, we can be facing quite a huge amount of traffic. Okay. Speed up a bit. For the legal and ethics part, we came up with the data management plan, so that everyone in the consortium knows how to manage the data and what we expect from the data management, especially speaking of any data that can be considered sensitive. Yeah, so I'll mostly speak here about the DNS logs. Yeah, so for the public service and the telcos that will be using the DNS for EU IP, a strict requirement is that immediate anonymization of anything that would be logged happens directly on the resolver immediately. And so that the IP address never shows up anywhere except the brief moment where it's in the memory where the resolver is handling the request. And then the telcos using their own IP address on the resolver, they will be the data controller. So it's up to them and up to their agreement with their customers how they will handle the data. And we will support both. We will either support anonymization, we can support pseudonymization, we can support different kinds of encryption, or they can simply lock the information with the original IP if it's like agreed with the customers and if it makes sense. But we don't think they would choose this direction. And for government, it's quite the opposite. We expect the government will want for the security team to protect the public institutions. They actually will want to lock the actual IP address. Yeah, so they are able to provide a service to those public institutions, and they can analyze what's happening and they can react to those situations. But it's a different use case. It's not like a physical person traffic. It's a traffic from public institutions that joined voluntarily. Yeah, and there are multiple similar use cases that you can put as an example. If the institution is running a firewall, they already have most probably the same data there. And speaking of third-party data sharing, we are being asked from time to time. We don't intend to share like very on a regular basis. Yeah, we more tend to we will share high-level statistics, aggregated data. That's okay, but for the raw data, we don't expect to share too much. And what we have defined as a requirement is that it has to come through a formal data sharing request, which will be overseen by the whole consortium to be really transparent. And we will support sharing for research that will somehow be beneficial for the security in EU member states. So if there will be some positive output for the security, that will, for example, contribute back to the DNS for EU, that's a good thing to do. Yet still, it will be fully anonymized, of course. Okay, and I will run through the threat intelligence a bit faster, probably, to fit in the time frame. Just to describe our logic, what we do on DNS for EU level, we would like to rely on multiple phases, on early detection at first. So we have multiple researches running within the consortium to be able to detect the threats either early on or even before they happen or before they are active, let's say. Then we also are running multiple initiatives for intelligence sharing across Europe and setting up the network, basically. We would also do a heavy analysis of the actual traffic. Right? It's an important building block. And last but not least, it will be to make the feedback loop complete, to evaluate what we are blocking and if we feel we are doing it properly. Yeah, so to avoid false positives, we will actually also evaluate what has been blocked and if this is a good thing or we should remove it because there is something that we did not expect.
Question about the false positives, Robert. By experience, I know that it's hard to detect false positives. Do you envision also a kind of customer channel that people can report false positives to you? Because
Yes,
that's usually the easiest way to detect a false positive, asking the customer to report them.
definitely,
Even need a
definitely.
chance to do.
Yeah, so for public, there will be a channel, to report the false positives. We are also prototyping an option to, although it is quite limited, to be able to report a false positive from the blocking page itself. Yet, of course, many people will not see the blocking page due to HTTPS issues, etc. But there will be other channels for the public, and there will be very straightforward. There already are very straightforward channels for the telcos and the government how to discuss and solve the false positive. So it's one of the important channels to be able to provide the users the option to report it. But how we envision it is it's a last resort. Whenever it's reported by the user, we consider it as basically a failure of our mechanism to prevent it in the first place. Yeah. So this is how we work with the idea of we don't want to force the users to have to report it to us, but it will happen in some cases, definitely.
Thanks.
And from the sharing perspective, I mean, we are setting up a network, especially of certs and other C-certs, etc., other security organizations. And we felt that the best way forward probably would be to run it on Mist, the malware information sharing platform, which eventually proved true. Okay. So basically everyone is running on Mist, which is positive, I would say, because it quite unifies or simplifies the thing how to exchange data. And now we have to speak with all the different stakeholders and discuss what can be shared, how it can be shared, what we can process, what we can get. And in many cases, we are also being asked of what we can get back. Speaking of, for example, some statistics of how their threat intelligence contributed to the performance of DNS for EU. Yeah, so it's like both a sharing, it's like we getting the indicators of compromise, and then contributing back with some overall statistics of how the indicators of compromise performed. So that's very interesting, and we have quite a heavy roadmap on integrating more and more organizations during this year.
Robert, did you already speak to anybody at first?
I don't have the particular list. Yeah, so I can get you in touch with the team responsible. Yeah, but I cannot answer. They have a huge spreadsheet that they are following. Yeah.
I just speaking as the DNS abuse ambassador for first.org, the incident responders group.
Okay.
Have you been speaking to anybody there yet? Yeah, maybe I should speak to. You can put me in touch with someone.
I believe so. Yeah, I believe so. I've spoken to some people from ENISA, but I don't have the particular details.
Okay, cool, great. Yeah. Thanks.
I'll reach out to you. Thank you, Peter. And again, at the very end, I would just like to repeat the high-level timeline. So the last year, 2023, it was mostly about preparations, kickoffs. This year, we are already starting. We already started some pilots last year. We are following more pilots this year. Already running some first deployments, the actual deployments. Speaking of telcos and governments, yeah, not yet public. Because public will be the thing for the next year. Yeah, we want to keep public for 2025 as we consider it as the most sensitive block and category of the whole project. Yeah, so we will do it as last and introduce the public resolvers next year, and then operate the whole infrastructure and everything in 2026 and onwards. Without the EU funding, so we have to be sure that we can continue. We have to prove that this service can be commercially viable, yeah, up until basically end of 2025. And that's it. Please, I mean, join or look at the website, follow the LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook account, anything that's suitable, works for you, for more updates. And I'm here for any questions.
Brilliant. Thanks, Robert. Have you got about 5 minutes or so for questions?
I do.
Excellent. Well, one first to just sort of reflect on what you said about the sort of the government element of all of this. So does that in effect mean that for government it is potentially sort of like a protected DNS service, a bit like the sort of US, UK, and a few other governments have? Is it comparable to that, or is that the plan at least that it will be?
Exactly. I mean, we see is actually a huge interest from governments, in similar services, because I mean, like price and effort wise, and the impact that they can achieve is very interesting, for them. So I mean, it can be deployed basically without them having to do much. The thing that would be on the government is to promote such a service internally and make sure it gets some it gets some adoption, but the impact for the effort is can be huge.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, I can see 2 sets of questions in the chat, and then I know Andreas has got his hand raised, so I'll do the 2 in the chat first. So we do them roughly in the order, and then we'll see if we've got time for others. So Kurt first. I think he's raised 3 questions. Are there any performance goals? What types of clients are planned to be supported? And are there any cast instances planned to be deployed also by other operators than DNS for EU?
Okay, for performance goals, well, we haven't defined the KPI for the public resolvers yet. Yeah, so what we have as a performance goal is that the protective part should not hinder the actual DNS resolution, and like notably, visibly, in a visible way for the end user. We don't have the KPI throughout EU what we expect, like an average latency. It's not defined. And what types of clients are planned to be supported? For us, I mean, we also consider some software agents, or we have them to some extent prepared. We will adjust them and use them for DNS for EU. We don't consider it as a primary use case though. So it's a regular suspect, iOS, Windows, Mac OS, Android at the moment as the scope. By the actual agent, and the rest via configuration of the DNS resolution. And if there are any cast instances planned to be deployed also by other operators than DNS for EU, no, actually. Yeah, so or I don't know if I get the question right, but the DNS for EU consortium will be running all the instances. Some of the instances may run in the telco networks, yet still will be under the same control and data plane under the common DNS for EU.
Yeah. Okay, I'll go to James's questions and then I'll come to Andreas, who's waiting patiently. So James Richards has asked, did you consider NX domain or other blocked query responses instead of a block page? And are you running a non-blocking version of the resolver?
Yeah, and NX domain is possible. I mean, configuration wise, it can be done for the public version. At the moment, we mostly consider only the blocking page aspect. Yet, I mean, we closely follow the option to use the eDNS messages for the browsers as soon as they will be supported, and we will be able to provide them to browsers, because it's a much stronger tool than the blocking page in the world of HTTPS. Yeah, so that's one perspective. The other is non-blocking version of the resolver. Yes, yeah, one of the IP addresses will be pure DNS resolution.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to Andreas, and then we'll see if we've got time for some of the other cool questions in the chat. So, Andreas, over to you.
Hope it's a quick one. Robert, in a meeting, in a public one you had in December, you mentioned even the name of the hosting partner where you're hosting the public one. Today, you avoided giving the name of this hosting partner. Is there any reason why you didn't name it today? Did it change maybe?
No, not really. I don't consider it that important. The primary one that we have chosen is a data packet. Yeah, but it may be just the primary one. Okay, I believe there is a strong chance we will combine multiple of those. Yeah, so data packet at the moment is the one that we are using for testing, for some benchmarking, etc. But if we find out that we don't have the proper coverage in all the regions, etc., we will simply employ more. Yeah, but for simplicity reasons, we are starting with data packet from like security, performance, and availability perspective. We find the services quite good or really good.
Yes.
Thanks, Andreas. Okay, question from Vicky Risk. We're looking for real actual query data for testing bind in the most realistic way possible. Is sharing anonymized queries for the purpose of improving other open source DNS implementations possible?
Maybe I would refer to the request for data sharing. Yeah, I believe so. For such use cases, I believe it would be doable, especially if we find a way how to make sure it's like 100% anonymous, etc. Yeah, I believe we would find a way. So again, as soon as it will be available on the website, the formal data sharing request, I would ask you to go through that procedure.
Do you have any idea when that would be available? Just
it will early 2025. It will not happen this year. Yeah,
okay.
Because it will be bound to the public service.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry everyone for running so early, but I have to jump to another meeting. Thank you very much for all the questions, and thank you for your attention. Please reach out to me directly via LinkedIn, email, and it was a pleasure.
Thank you, Robert. Appreciate that. And if you're happy to share the slides, I'll send those out afterwards, if that's okay.
We'll do it. Thank you, Andrew. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Okay, apologies for anyone who we didn't get round to covering the questions with. Again, I'll share those with Robert afterwards and see if we can pick those up post-call. So you get responses if he's able to afterwards. Okay, I'll just quickly reshare my screen. I hope that was useful, by the way. Right, so I'm going to just quickly whiz through a few recent developments. I'm not going to dwell on these, as those of you that have an interest will have picked them up from our weekly email from earlier on today. I just highlight a couple of things to point you towards post-call if they're of interest. So following from our call last week, on the RIPE blog this week, SIDN Labs have put a post up about the impact of quantum safe cryptography algorithms on DNSSEC. So last week, you may remember, we had some input on post-quantum. So this is continuing that, but albeit from a different aspect. So understanding whether the algorithms will work well with DNSSEC, what the implications are. There's also more content on blockchain naming services, picking up on a call we had just before Christmas. So there's more of that as you would anticipate, several different posts on that. Beyond that, the other one I mentioned, because I think he's on the call, Joe St. Saviour put up an interesting sort of tutorial on how to find subdomains of interest within a large data set, which some of you may well find useful. So that will be worth a look if that's in your area of interest. There's a bunch of other items of interest, such as EU-US data sharing, for example. Under the Digital Services Act, the European Commission has put request for information to 17 very large online platforms and search engines, etc., and a couple of conflicting stories on Chrome and privacy, which was interesting to me, and probably will be to those of you who have an interest in the policy space. Plenty of other things there, including a post from Kathleen on LLM misinformation on the APNIC blog, which again will probably be worth a look for you. What I just wanted to also signpost, which is why I'm going through this quite quickly, I had a chance to take a look last week at the output or the results of the recent ITF non-com process. I've put some of the key ones here. So in the order that I picked them up, in terms of the IAB appointments, there were a huge number of applicants for the IAB this time around. I think it was 30 something, all told. The upshot being that one of the existing members who's up for reselection, Mallory Nodal, wasn't reselected. However, Alyssa Cooper, who many of us will know from her prior involvement with the ITF, has been appointed to the IAB, as well as two new participants, or one other new participant, sorry, Matthew Bockey from Nokia, who I don't know, others may well do. On the IESG, Roman, one of the existing SEC area directors, has been selected as the IESG chair, and therefore the Gen area director as well. You'll see I listed other appointments. So in Art, Ori Steele and Murray have been appointed as Art ADs. Eric has been reappointed as Internet Area AD, and so on. So you'll see sort of various appointments there. Also, I picked up Alyssa, who up until very recently had worked for some years for Cisco, has now moved more into academia. So in addition to being appointed to the IAB, she's also been appointed as the inaugural exec director of the Knight Georgetown Institute, which I think is part of Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. And because of Roman's appointment to the IESG chair, that has made a new vacancy for a new security AD. And when I looked, I think it was on Friday, there were 5 applicants. And they were the non-com were asking for any comments against any of those 5 applicants. So do bear that in mind, that there's a number of sort of names out there. If you've got any opinions on any of those 5, I can't remember what the cutoff was, but I think it's going to be quite soon to express those views via the non-com website. Also, just briefly, the Internet Governance Forum, it was announced at the meeting, at the end of the meeting in Kyoto, that the next meeting would take place in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, but no date was mentioned. That's in the last couple of days been confirmed. It'd be the 15th to the 19th of December, so the back end of this year, a couple of months later than it was for Kyoto. And as part of the sort of preparatory process for IGF 24, there's an open consultation, a multi-staker advisory group meeting at the end of February, which you can join either in person or remotely. And as I understand it, that's open registration, so anyone can register for that. And also for the IGF, the call for thematic inputs is still open and is open until the end of this month, to help set the sort of main focus of the agenda for the meeting at the end of the year. So some things on the IGF front. In terms of calls for papers and workshop proposals, I've got quite a few of these. Again, I won't go through them all because many of them have been listed previously. But just a reminder, in fact, actually I realise this is past now, apologies. You've just missed the birds of a feather deadline for ITF 119 in March. So if you did intend to put those in and missed it, you've now missed the cut-off. We've got a few cut-offs sort of coming up, be that Apricot in, I think that's Thailand, at the end of February, and various other things which we've covered previously, and then just over the page. There's also a call for applications for YouthDig, deadline of which is the middle of February, for those of you that qualify for YouthDig. Also, I saw this morning that Centre have announced they have a Jamboree policy-centered event. They got a call for proposals, which closes at the 3rd of March. The event itself takes place in late May, but if you wish to put forward policy proposals for that, you've got a little while to do so. I think that was pretty much it. Yeah, in terms of forthcoming events, a reminder, I'm not going to go through all these, take far too long. ITF 119, the super early rate, I think it's now called, that runs until next Monday. So if you're not registered yet and are planning to attend either in person or remotely, if you register before the end of next Monday, you'll save quite a lot of money, especially if you're going to attend in person. I think it goes up by just over $200 for the week if you register after next Monday. So do bear that in mind. And yeah, I've added to the bottom of the centre Jamboree in Copenhagen. You'll see there at the end of the May. So there's quite a few events running through this next sort of 4 or 5 months or so. If you've got any others you wish me to add, by the way, please just drop me a line. I'll happily add those to the list. Then finally from me, just briefly, we'll have a second DNS for EU centric call next week, but the focus just really more on policy analysis of the initiative itself, which should complement nicely the sort of technical update that you've heard from Robert today. So I'm quite looking forward to that. And you can see we've got various other things planned over the next couple of months or so. I've got a couple of gaps, so if anyone has any proposals for things you wish to present, please do drop me a line. I'll happily add those in. And with that in mind, I did have an email over the weekend from one of our mailing list participants in New Zealand who suggested it be really useful to include topics related to the multi-signer model, rollovers under the multi-signer model, best practices, etc. So if anyone has any thoughts on that or suggestions as to who might be well placed to cover all or any of that, again, please just let me know. I'll be happy to take any suggestions on board. I think that's it from me. I ran through that deliberately quite quickly, so I was conscious we've covered quite a lot of ground with Robert. I can see there's plenty of things in the chat, so if I stop sharing, I may possibly be able to see some of those. But let me stop talking and see if anyone's got anything you want to comment on, or any additional topics that you would like to mention. And if you do, either sort of raise your hand, unmute, or pop something in the chat, and I will rapidly have a quick look to see what else is in the chat, which looks mainly questions related to DNS for EU. So as I mentioned, I will forward those to Robert to see if we get responses to those post-call. Yeah, they do mainly look like they're DNS3U related. So I will, yeah, I'll take those and share those with Robert to see if he can respond to that. But does anyone have anyone else, so anything else even that you wanted to raise, or any other comments or questions? And thank you, Vicky. I can see a suggestion with regards to the multi-signer model. So maybe I'll pick that up with you directly. Anybody else with any thoughts, either on multi-signer model or indeed anything else that's on your minds at the moment? I'm not seeing any hands raised. I don't think anyone else is typing. Last chance. But anything else? Okay, well, look, thank you, everyone, then. I hope you found that helpful. As I said earlier, I'll ask Robert for a copy of his slides. So you've got that, got those to refer to. Hopefully that was a useful presentation. Beyond that, have a fantastic week. Hopefully not too windy for those of you that are affected by one of the current storms that are coming across Europe at the moment. But have a fantastic week, and look forward to catching up again this time next week for the second instalment of our DNS4 EU discussion. So see you all then. Thanks, everyone.